It's an experiential statement rooted in a theological claim. It is not based on historical proof. Thank you.
We have 7 questions, and 3 of them are for Dr. Ehrman, 3 of them are for Mike Licona. I'm sure they're questions that they have not faced before, so we'll trust their ability to respond immediately to the question after a moment of reflection or so. Then we have a 7th question that simply asks for their opinion on this one issue, and we'll ask both of them to respond to that one. In fact, they're all addressed to the gentleman in each of the questions. So this one's to Dr. Ehrman. According to your definition of miracle as the least probable explanation of the resurrection, how do you explain the birth and growth of the church without the resurrection of Jesus? That would be the least probable occurrence had Jesus not been raised.
Yes, thank you. This is an excellent question. It's a very difficult question. I teach a PhD seminar at UNC Chapel Hill on this question. We spend an entire semester with PhD students trying to answer this question. It takes us an entire semester to get to the bottom of the answer. So let me give you the 25-second version. I sometimes get asked, doesn't the fact that Christianity succeeded show that Jesus must have been raised from the dead? I think the answer to that is no. Because if you want to say that the success of religion has to be based on the truth of its truth claims, then what do you do about all the other religions in the world? Is Islam true because it succeeded? Is Hinduism true because there are so many millions of Hindus? Or Buddhism? Or Judaism? Or Christianity? Religions are true whether they're true independently on the historical basis. Religions grow, I'm told to stop. Religions grow not because necessarily something miraculous happened at the beginning of those religions, but for other circumstances.
And a question for Mike Licona. How significant is it that women are called as witnesses to the resurrection? Yes, if you'd like to. I would allow you a 30-second response, either response.
I agree with Professor Ehrman on this one. And you can't explain the belief or the growth of the church without belief in the resurrection. So that's what we're looking at, not the resurrection, but belief in the resurrection. But tonight's debate is on the best explanation for how they came to that belief in the resurrection. And I've argued that the resurrection is the best cause of that belief.
Any further response?
No, that's fine.
Mike, how significant is it that women are called as witnesses to the resurrection?
How significant for the witnesses?
Yeah. How significant is it that women, and I'm reading literally, are called as witnesses to the resurrection?
Well, that has to do with the empty tomb, which I haven't argued this evening, because it's the empty tomb, one of those facts that belongs to historical bedrock. I believe it, but I haven't included it because of that. So I do think it's significant. However, the women, because a woman's testimony in the first century was not regarded very highly. And in fact, most Jews thought that it was men who would be the recipients of divine revelation, not women. So this double type of embarrassment there, plus the fact that it's in a patriarchal society, the men are cowering behind closed doors. If you were making this up in the first century, you just would not have made this up if you want them to follow and believe in the resurrection.
30 seconds? Sure, okay. No, this is a really interesting argument that a lot of people have made, that nobody would have made up the idea of women discovering the empty tomb, because as Mike is saying, women were not seen as credible witnesses. There are several problems. First of all, Paul is our first witness to the resurrection. He mentions the resurrection appearances, and he never mentions any women. The first source that mentions any women is the Gospel of Mark. But you have to ask, is Mark unbiased when he's talking about women? Mark has an overarching emphasis that nobody could understand who Jesus was. His family doesn't understand who he was. The Jewish leaders don't understand who he was. The disciples don't understand who he was. The only one who understands who Jesus was in this gospel are the demons and the centurion who crucified him. So who's going to discover the empty tomb? It's not going to be his family or the religious leaders. It's going to be people on the outside. It's women. In other words, this fits a particular mark and motif, so it's somewhat questionable as a historical datum.
Thank you. Let's give them, how much time are you giving them for this question? Let's give them at least 2 to 3 minutes, if you don't mind. Dr. Ehrman, one of the criteria, excuse me, this thing is acting up on me a little bit. One of the criteria given for evaluating evidence were independent accounts. Doesn't the fact that some of the accounts are difficult to reconcile, and I assume the Gospels are meant here, indicate that they were independent? Aren't these discrepancies similar to what one would find between witnesses in a courtroom?
Yeah, excellent question. Did everybody hear the question?
Here.
Okay. I pointed out you need independent witnesses for historical evidence, and the question is, since you have discrepancies between the accounts, doesn't that show that they're independent witnesses? And so doesn't that, in fact, doesn't that increase the probability that you've got independent attestation of the resurrection? And it's an excellent point. But the way you have to establish whether the Gospels are independent of one another is by a detailed analysis of their similarities and their differences. Scholars have been doing this for hundreds of years. And what scholars have pretty much shown, I mean, it's pretty standard. I assume Mike's going to agree with this. Mark and priority? No? Yes, okay. I mean, what most scholars think is that Mark was the first gospel written and that Matthew and Luke used Mark as a source. So whenever they change Mark, whenever they're different from Mark, it's because one of them has changed it for some reason of their own. And this is significant because it can show you that if Matthew is different from Mark in any particular, it means Matthew has intentionally changed something in Mark. And that can show you Matthew's overarching intentions. Or Luke, and so forth. And so it's interesting that, for example, in some of the later Gospels, it's not the women who discover the tomb. The women go off, and the men discover the tomb. And the men then serve as the witnesses. Why is that? Because the point Mike is pointing out, that in fact people were loath to attribute testimony value to what women had to say. So I don't think the mere fact that they're different shows they're independent accounts. What it shows is that some accounts are being changed in the process of the transmission. Okay.
Mike, do you have any response?
Because I'm having trouble with my voice, I think I'll save it for something in which we're going to have greater disagreement on.
Okay, and for Mike Licona, are there continuing claims of messiahship following Jesus' recorded death and resurrection, or does this period of Son of God claims subside, following Jesus, implying that the true Son of God had indeed come?
I'm going to have to apologize. I really don't understand that question, but I would I would like to answer it. This is going to be tough. Maybe if I stand, it will help. Maybe I can more with the Son of Man imagery. Yeah.
I think what the question is
Did
asking.
people stop expecting a Messiah after Jesus?
If did anybody expect another Son of God, or the fact that Jesus was Son of God show that no more sons of God were expected?
Okay. Well, of course, the Christians didn't expect another Messiah, but other Jews did in coming years. They expected a Messiah. So, like Sabbatai Tzvi said he was the Messiah, and then he was, he gave that up under threat of torture. So, yeah, Jews later on believed that there would, and Jews today still wait for a Messiah. But Christians thought that Jesus was the Messiah. They didn't continue to look for someone else.